international banking messaging system. This will help prevent Russia from conducting most of its financial transactions worldwide. Vicky Price from the Centre of Economics and Business Research told GBNews earlier the move could inflict a crippling economic blow on Moscow.
It will be painful for Russia without any doubt. I mean, Russia is dependent on those exports in order to distribute the money, if you like, to the population and keep them happy. Something like 40% of all the tax revenues that Russia collects come from oil and gas, for example. I mean, that's huge. If any of that is disrupted, then, you know, there are question marks as to how do you continue with funding the military or anything else.
Kharkiv's governor says Ukraine is still in full control of its second largest city after Russian forces entered early this morning. Intensive rocket artillery exchanges overnight have been followed by heavy fighting in the area. The Ukrainian president announced the country is setting up a foreign legion to bring in volunteers from abroad. Volodymyr Zelensky said the night had been brutal, with shelling of civilian buildings.
They are fighting against everyone. They are fighting against all living beings, against kindergartens, residential buildings, against ambulances. They use rocket artillery, missiles in city districts where there are not, and never were, any military facilities.
President Zelensky there, he also said Ukrainian forces had held off Russian troops advancing on the capital. That as the mayor of Kyiv confirmed there are no Russian troops in his city. Vitaly Klitschko said that in total 31 people have died in the capital since the attack started, including 9 civilians, while 106 people have been injured. 368,000 Ukrainians have already fled for Poland, Moldova and other neighbouring countries. The United Nations is warning the number could grow to 4 million if fighting escalates further. Prime Minister Boris Johnson's confirmed the UK will take refugees fleeing the war. The Deputy Defence Minister for Ukraine says Russia has lost around 4,300 men so far in the invasion, as well as 146 tanks and 26 helicopters. Irina Desipio is the president of the Revived Soldiers of Ukraine, a US charity organising aid. She told GBNews of her parents who fled Ukraine to Poland and how her brother's defending his country. She says Ukrainians are fighting with their bare hands and the invasion will incur big Russian losses.
Our privilege is that we know territory. We own our land. We know every corner. We know every house. So for Russians, it's much harder to come in and fight. That's why they're losing a lot of people. I can't believe Putin is sending his own people to die, because they will die.
An oil terminal has been set ablaze after Russian missiles hit the Ukrainian town of Vasilkiv, southwest of the capital. Authorities have warned residents to be on alert for toxic fumes. Russian-backed separatists in Ukraine's Luhansk province claim an oil terminal has been blown up by a Ukrainian missile in the town of Ravenki. And here in the UK, police forces in England and Wales have recorded the highest numbers of rapes since Sarah Everard's murder almost a year ago. The Office for National Statistics also recorded the second highest number of sexual offences since April last year. Ms Everard was killed by serving Met Officer Wayne Couzens in South London in March last year. Rail firms are ramping up services that had been cancelled due to COVID. Avanti West Coast and East Midlands Railway are bringing back lines cut in December and January. For those coming to London, North Wales and Chester will get a second daily service to and from the capital, and trains from Manchester and Birmingham to Euston will be doubled from Monday. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now back to Real Britain with Darren Grimes.
Welcome to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Thank you very much for your company and for tuning in on telly and radio with me this afternoon. Here's what's coming up on the show. Kharkiv's governor says that Ukraine is still in full control of its second largest city after Russian forces entered early this morning. The Ukrainian president announced the country is setting up a foreign legion to bring in volunteers from abroad. Volodymyr Zelensky said the night had been brutal with shelling of civilian buildings. University education has hit the headlines this week. It was announced that students who start university next year could be paying off their loans for 40 years after graduating. And it's being considered whether students without at least a GCSE pass in English and maths or 2 E-grade A-levels should be given access to student loans at all. Chelsea's Russian owner, Roman Abramovich, has given trustees of Chelsea's charitable foundation the stewardship and care of the club. The move has been made amid Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Chelsea today has come out and said the situation in Ukraine is horrific and devastating. I'll be looking at how else the world of sport is turning its back on Russia. That's what we're talking about for the next hour. I'd absolutely love to know your thoughts, so tweet me at GBNews or you can email us on gbviews@gbnews.uk. Don't forget, you can watch us online too. Go on YouTube, search, whack in GB News, and whilst you're there, click on that red subscribe button as well. Cheers. Now, my club, Newcastle United, won yet another match yesterday, meaning that we've had quite the winning streak so far this year. It's not something, folks, you can usually say as a fan of Newcastle United. But this wasn't my favourite football moment of the weekend. My favourite came when Manchester City and Everton were warming up at Goodison Park. The Ukrainian internationals Vitaly Malenko and Alexander Zinchenko met at the halfway line to hug and console each other in support of their homeland. The pictures and videos shared widely across social media of players and fans coming together to show their support for Ukraine in the face of invasion and bloody war by Russia's psychotic, murderous, former KGB leader has touched so many of us. The West is united in the view that if we don't act now, Putin won't stop once he's installed some pro-Russian puppet as leader of Ukraine, mimicking what we see right now in Belarus. He'll want to carve up as much territory he can to leave a lasting legacy for this supreme aging narcissist. And speaking of leadership, Putin has underestimated the bravery and fortitude of the Ukrainian president. It's arguably easy to have done so, right? Volodymyr Zelensky was elected in 2019 under quite bizarre circumstance. He was elected, folks, as a comedian without political experience and starred in the political satire drama Servant of the People. His character became president of Ukraine by accident. All of this would perhaps leave Putin and the rest of the world of the view that Zelensky was destined to be a joke. Not so, folks, not so at all. On Friday night, to directly challenge Russian media assertions that the president had fled Kiev, he recorded a video from a smartphone of him on the street in the capital, surrounded by advisors and his prime minister. We are protecting our independence, our state, and it will continue to be this way. How many of us can seriously say we display such bravery with such a statement as the comedian turned statesman? The bravery of war correspondents and social media users mean this war cannot be conducted in secret. Even if in Russia itself, there have been almost 2,000 arrests for protests against the war. To protest in a country like Russia, you need to have a spine of steel. It's the first war I and so many of us have likely followed via social media. It's the first war for many of us where we've had live updates of watching the drama unfold in our own continent with the kind of shock and awe that we're used to seeing on Netflix, not from Europe. The small children cradled by their mothers, kissing and hugging their fathers goodbye as they're dropped at the border, clutching their suitcases, the kind of suitcases we're used to seeing used for short-haul flights, not for starting a new life as a refugee. It's all hit so hard because there is absolutely nothing to say it couldn't happen here. We've had the most brutal wake-up call, placing into perspective the nonsensical culture wars propagated by left-wing activists, how decadent, how disgustingly comfortable we have become to focus on such pathetic battles. In a country not very far away, we're seeing how quickly the luxury of being decadent and comfortable can dissipate, how quickly the flame of freedom can be not extinguished entirely, but diminished for sure. We're starting to see the seeds of a West getting its act together. We've all come together to cut Russian banks off from the main international payment system, SWIFT. We're starting to hear of the need to find alternative energy solutions to Russia's oil and Russia's gas. All NATO members smelling the coffee on spending 2% of GDP on defence. Only a third currently actually do so. Germany, most radically, is setting up a special fund to rebuild its army, a €100 billion investment, raising defence spending permanently above 2% of GDP. Now, say what you want about President Trump, folks, right? But his warning on NATO not meeting its commitments was absolutely the right one to make, quite clearly to me. Putin has shaken Germany out of the delusions of the Merkel years, in which it was thought Nord Stream 2, a pipeline of Russian gas to Germany, was a good idea. Putin's invasion has exposed Europe's decaying defences. Now, folks, right now is the time to act before we are the people of Ukraine, who only last week would have been sat drinking coffees with their mates, only to find themselves being hurtled toward the border of a foreign country or into war to face an armed-to-the-teeth enemy. We need to remember why our values are worth fighting for, revitalise them and actually commit to defending them. Do you think it's time? Do you folks think it's time for a focus on freedom and liberty and not wackery and wokery? Now, Ukrainian forces are battling Russian troops on the streets of Ukraine's second city, Kharkiv, on the fourth day of invasion. The governor says Ukraine is still in full control of its second largest city. This comes as more than 368,000 Ukrainians have already fled for Poland, Moldova and other neighbouring countries. The United Nations is warning the number could well grow to 4 million if fighting escalates further. Joining me now from Ukraine is Maria Avdiva, Research Director at the European Expert Association. Maria, thank you very much for joining me. I just want to know, first of all, my heart goes out to all of you there. It really, really does. Could you just tell our viewers what it's actually been like on the ground with this ever-changing picture of danger, frankly?
Thank you so much for having me and for your brilliant speech. I wish it would be translated to Ukrainian so that Ukrainians will hear. We know that Britain supports us with all it can do, and that is really important to hear also. So what has happened during the night and day is today at 1 a.m. hard shelling started in Kharkiv, where I live. It's a 1.5 million city on the east of Ukraine, 40 kilometers from the borders with Russia. So 3 days ago, Russian troops already entered the territory of Ukraine and are now located near the city itself. And they were shelling the city very hard during the night. And also there was an explosion on the gas pipeline in the city. And one of the buildings was hit by the missiles. One of the buildings where actually people live, residential areas. And then at the morning, we've got news that Russian troops on light military vehicles, they went into the city, and the streets fights started, and Ukrainian military fighted back fiercely, and they have destroyed most of the military equipment and military vehicles that Russia used, and they pushed back the Russian occupants from our city. And, you know, that reminds me very much of World War II, when Hitler tried to occupy Kharkiv, and Kharkiv was fighting back at that time. And now, you know, the new Hitler is here near our border, and his name is Mr. Putin. So
Yes.
what we have for now is the shelling continues, and the Russian troops are back on their positions, but it is apparently they will probably try to get back to the city, probably during the night or tomorrow in the morning. And people spend their nights here with children and elderly in shelters. The metro is used as a shelter. And so everyone is here trying to help as much as possible. And those people who can hold arms, they go out to streets and fight with their arms. And apparently Putin didn't expect to see such kind of resistance from Ukrainians, because when we see videos from the captured Russian officers and soldiers, they say that they were not told where they were going. They said that they didn't know. They were told that they were going to training and then found themselves on Ukrainian territory. So they are not ready to fight. They surrender. Some of them are just kids that Putin has sent here in Ukraine to die. To die for what? For himself. Now he's today talking with his higher military officers, saying that the NATO countries and the European countries threaten him because they with their response, and Russia should now have some measures back against the other countries. So he is not threatening Ukraine only. He is threatening all the world, all the free world.
Well, Maria, I've got two questions from that. First of all, are there any members of your family who are out there putting their lives at risk right now to advance the cause of freedom in Ukraine? And actually, we've got some breaking news at the top of the hour here. Ukraine's president's office has said that Ukrainian envoys are going to meet Russian diplomats as Russian troops actually draw closer to the capital city. Are you optimistic, actually, that some kind of peaceful settlement can be reached through these negotiations, or is this just another ploy by Russia?
I would start from the talks. Yes, it was the recent news that the talks will be held on Pripyat River, which is on the border with Ukraine and Belarus. Because today we had news that Lukashenko is going to participate in this war, and he is sending his aircrafts and airborne to Kiev and to Zhytomyr. So that they will participate in this war. But now that with this news that the talks are possible, of course, it gives hope that Putin will stop his troops, stop this invasion, and that it will be made not on the his conditions, because what he was talking about denazification. What kind of denazification is he speaks about? Like I live in Kharkiv, which is a Russian-speaking big city, and the Russian language was never discriminated here. There are no Nazis here. The only Nazi whom we see now is himself. So I think that now we are in a strong position. Putin understands that his plan falls because he was speaking he would get Kiev in 2 hours. Now it's already 3 days, and all the Russian mighty army, which was threatening the whole world, is not capable of taking control over Ukrainian city. So Ukraine is on the strong position right away, and I think that is a good perspective for the talks, and probably Putin will put on hold his invasion. And what about other people whom I know, my colleagues, friends who are participating in these military activities? I have lots of them. Almost all my friends are now with the arms or in any kind of civic resistance. For example, we have been instructed how to prepare Molotov cocktails, and now people on the streets actually gather to make them and to prepare them to use against the military vehicles if they are in the city. People help with what they can, provide medical assistance, support with food supplies. Lots of restaurants and cafes are now saying that they are providing military with food they can prepare. And so we see here in just unity in Ukraine, which I has never seen before in my country. And that is what Putin has did to Ukraine. Now we have a so strong and united nation ready to fight for its freedom.
And Maria, we see the scenes of Ukrainians in, train stations and underground in rail stations and all these other things. And it reminds me of pictures of the Blitz, when Britain was bombed by the Nazis. And we actually, I think, in this country, our hearts are going out to your nation. They really, really are. Would you like to see more support from the United Kingdom at this time?
We have already great support, and for you to know, when Britain started supplying Ukraine with NLAWs, the anti-tank missiles, before Putin started the war, we were counting every airplane bringing that to Ukraine, because we knew that our soldiers will need this in their fight with Russia. So every help counts now, and Britain does enormous support in uniting the efforts of other European countries, because what Putin was counting at, probably, that Europe will be weak and will not be united, and he will not meet any kind of united position. But for what we see now is that all the countries are together in this, and the ban on SWIFT that was put into action yesterday, and the ban on Russian banks transaction, and we will also would see probably the Gazprom sanctions. So all of this shows Mr. Putin that the world is not threatened by him, and we are united, and we will fight back.
Yeah, well, Maria, I think I speak on behalf of a fair few Brits when I say that we've stood up to bullies before, and we're certainly not going to let this one get his way. So God bless you all. Maria Avdiva, thank you so much for your time. Research Director at the European Expert Association. All of us here at GB News are absolutely sending you our best wishes. Now, there's plenty more to come this afternoon on Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. We're going to continue on the theme of Ukraine, but first, let's have a little look at that weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, the UK is looking fine and sunny with a little cloud and rain possible in the west. Let's take a look at the details. Turning cloudier in the southwest this evening. The cloud could be thick enough to bring the odd spot of rain for a time. It'll be breezy, especially along southern coast. The southeast of England will end the day with continued dry and sunny conditions for all. There'll be a brisk southerly breeze. Increasing amounts of patchy clouds will continue to spread eastwards across southern and western Wales this evening. It'll turn increasingly breezy here too. In contrast, it'll be a fine end to Sunday across all parts of the Midlands. There'll be plenty of sunshine with a rather brisky southerly breeze, feeling quite spring-like. The northeast of England will also end the day dry with plenty of sunshine. There'll be a brisk southerly wind, especially along the coast, and temperatures will dip quickly after sunset. There'll be a west-east split across Scotland this evening with dry and sunny weather for eastern areas and cloudier conditions in the west with a little rain possible. Patchy cloud and sunny spells across Northern Ireland, but thicker cloud and rain also approaching from the west throughout the evening. The winds will increase too. Cloud, rain and stronger winds will edge in from the west overnight, the rain turning heavy at times over western hills. And that's how the weather's shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Join me, Anaya Falarin Imam, for the discussion every Sunday at 3 p.m. here. From big ideas to questions shaping the public conversation, we tackle the moral, cultural and political implications of news stories.
We need to share this conversation democratically.
It has become so toxic, this debate.
They relish this kind of discourse.
From fascinating guests to challenging ideas, you won't want to miss it. The discussion every Sunday at 3 p.m. here, GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
I'm Darren Grimes. Thank you very much for your company. Now, continuing the discussion about the invasion of Ukraine, I'm joined by Philip Ingram, a former senior military officer. Philip, that news that we received at the top of the hour there about potentially there being a peace deal brokered at the border, are you optimistic? But at a time when we're hearing also reports of the Russian president ordering his armed forces to put its nuclear deterrent on high alert?
Well, it's a start. I don't think it's a negotiation of a peace deal. It's the start of talks, which can only be a good thing. However, with Putin having put his strategic deterrent on a higher alert, with him suffering on the ground and not achieving the objectives he wants to do, it looks as if, and he's sending a message out that I'd interpret that he's got very few places to maneuver. And then there was the threat of Belarusian forces coming and getting involved as well. At least these talks will hopefully open dialogue that will continue potentially down some form of proper peace, to create some form of proper peace deal. However, what could happen is they meet, they find it unacceptable, and it then just ramps things up afterwards. Only time will tell.
Yeah, I mean, I've been really struck by the way in which the Russian army seemed to have been really taken aback. You know, we heard from Maria in Ukraine, just at the last guest there, talking about the way in which these young boys that Putin has sent over have no idea what they're doing, right? Putting their lives at risk, and for what? I think actually I've been struck by, at least this is what I pick up from social media, which is obviously slanted towards the Ukrainian forces. But actually, the resistance of the Ukrainian people has just been absolutely astonishing. It's, well, it's shocking, really, to me.
It's phenomenal. I'm a former senior intelligence officer and NATO planner. I've planned operations at this sort of level, so I understand the dynamics of what's going on. And so far, everything that Putin has tried to do, he's failed at. He's failed to gain air superiority, which is essential in the first few days. He's failed to execute strategic operations to gain advantages around Kiev, which will be his main effort, and resulted in his air mobile operation to try and capture an airfield being stopped, 2 big paratroop carrying aircraft being shot down. He's failed to get his ground forces properly into northern Kiev quickly. So he's effectively fixed, and he's trying to find different ways to maneuver. And he suddenly realized that the rest of the world is hurting him, and hurting him hard, with the sanctions and the supply of weapon systems into the Ukrainians. And remember, the Ukrainians are fighting for national survival and for the survival of their families, whereas Putin is bringing in a proportion of poorly trained troops, poorly motivated troops, many of whom you've heard don't even know where they're going and why they're going there. They do not stack up, and no matter how many you've got or what equipment you've got, they do not stack up against a well-motivated, well-trained force that is fighting for national survival.
Philip, 2 points on that. The Germans are actually saying, well, we're going to ramp up and spend 100 billion euros on actually ensuring that they have robust defences in place, whether that be on ships, tanks, guns, you name it. They're going to start investing in it. Do you think this has been the wake-up call? The fact that the Russians could just walk over the border into Ukraine, a sovereign territory, a sovereign a nation-state actually fighting for its own right to self-determination. Do you think actually the reason the Germans are waking up, the reason that we in this country are saying, I think the cuts to the armed forces were a mistake, is the world starting to wake up to the threat to freedom?
Well, in one word, yes, and the Germans have woken up hugely. We shouldn't underestimate the political significance of what Germany has done. They have never supplied weapons directly into a conflict zone beforehand. Psychologically and politically, this is a massive, massive, massive step for them to do this. And then to recognise that they need to up their spending to 2% of GDP to meet the NATO commitments, but they also need to rebuild their military properly to get it fit to do something. And again, I hope we see this reflected in statements out of the UK Secretary of State for Defence. In the last few months, we hear senior generals coming out with silly words like NGIF and pentamphibians, describing how they're going to look at modern warfare in the cyber environment. You don't need tanks. Well, this is proving that to be completely wrong. I was going to use a slightly different word there, but I won't on air.
Yes, absolutely. Philip Ingram, former senior military officer, thank you very much for your time and your insight. Now, you're with GB News on TV and DAB radio. The war in Ukraine is dominating sports too. Coming up, we'll be talking Chelsea's Russian owner, Roman Abramovich, giving trustees of Chelsea's charitable foundation the stewardship and care of the club. But first, it's time for a check on the news headlines with the very radiant Rhiannon Jones.
Wow, thank you, Darren. It's 2:33. Here are your top stories in the GB newsroom. President Zelensky's office has said Ukrainian and Russian officials will meet for talks on the border between Belarus and Ukraine, and that both delegations will meet without preconditions. The Ukrainian president had said this morning that he is ready for peace talks with Russia, just not in Belarus, as it served as a staging ground for the invasion. President Putin's order to put nuclear deterrent forces on high alert is an unacceptable escalation. That's according to the US ambassador to the United Nations. It follows G7 leaders declaring earlier that they'll cut off some Russian banks from SWIFT, the international banking messaging system. That would help prevent Russia from conducting financial transactions worldwide. Kharkiv's governor says Ukraine is still in full control of its second largest city after Russian forces entered early this morning. Intensive rocket artillery exchanges overnight have been followed by heavy fighting in the area. Ukraine's president says his forces have held off Russian troops advancing on the capital. That as the mayor of Kyiv confirmed there are no Russian troops in his city. Vitaly Klitschko said that in total 31 people have died in the capital since the attack started, including 9 civilians, while 106 people have been injured. An oil terminal has been set ablaze after Russian missiles hit the Ukrainian town of Vasilikiv, southwest of the capital. Authorities have been warned residents to be on alert for toxic fumes. Russian-backed separatists in Ukraine's Luhansk province claim an oil terminal's been blown up by a Ukrainian missile in the town of Rivenki. And Niagara Falls has been lit up in support of Ukraine. The waterfall on the US-Canada border has been illuminated in blue and yellow, creating an orange-coloured mist. It's one of several landmarks around the world to be lit up in the colours of the Ukrainian flag as a show of solidarity for its people. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. We'll have a full update for you at the top of the hour. It's back to Real Britain with Darren Grimes next. Don't go anywhere.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Darren Grimes. Thank you very much for your company. Now, earlier in the month, I tweeted a question about the future of tuition fees. I asked, do you think we ought to abolish tuition fees? I've seen some arguments that if we do that, we should drastically reduce the number of Mickey Mouse degrees that are no use to man nor beast, or the number of places available. Well, many of you got in touch to give your thoughts. Alex said, all education should be free in a progressive society. Education is a right and not a privilege. Meanwhile, Spencer says we need to stop young people wasting their time and money going to university. We need to fully fund the proper courses. We should turn the rest into technology colleges to give 21-year-olds useful skills. Now, whereas Brian actually tweeted saying, you make a valid point about the quality of degrees and number of places. Traditionally, you'd have been able to pay off your tuition fees easily after you graduated. We'll have two students on at the end of the show to debate this and give their views. It's now 2:39. The invasion of Ukraine has also impacted the world of sports. Just last night, Chelsea's Russian owner, Roman Abramovich, says he's given the trustees of Chelsea's charitable foundation the stewardship and care of the club. The 2022 Champions League final will be played in Paris rather than Russia. Man United have terminated their sponsorship deal with Russia's national airline. F1 said it was impossible to hold the Russian GP this year, given the current circumstances. Joining me now is the chief sports writer at the Sunday People, Neil Moxley. Hiya, Neil. Neil, what do you make of Chelsea's Russian owner's statement of actually handing over the stewardship of the club? I noticed, by the way, he was loath to actually say anything about the invasion of Ukraine and anything about President Putin himself.
Oh, good afternoon, Darren. The first thing, I think it's a preemptive strike by Roman Abramovich. I think he's pretty much just read the room. There's a wave after wave of condemnation that's flooding into down the airwaves and on our television screens against this conflict. And obviously, as a former Russian national, or he can still consider himself as a Russian national, we don't really know because we never hear from him. Living in having a high-profile football club that he owns as an asset, I think he's basically just it had to be seen to be doing something. And I think a lot of clever people have got together in a room and come up with this as a course of action, whereby it looks as though things have changed, but nothing really has changed.
Yeah, exactly. So he's still the owner ultimately, right? It's you know, no use to man, no beast, really, what's happened here.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, you know, if you think that Roman Abramovich before this statement was deciding upon the, you know, the colour of the toilet rolls at the club's training ground, then you'd be sadly mistaken. Obviously, would he have a say still in that if Chelsea went to sign a £100 million footballer in the next transfer window? Well, you would think so, since he's still listed as the owner of the football club, and you know, that sort of outlay wouldn't be sanctioned without his say so. So, really and truthfully speaking, Darren, the situation is just a nod towards what has gone on, but little in effect has really changed.
Yeah, do you think we're going to see similar scenes today to the scenes that we saw yesterday with the Man City and Everton game, where you had two Ukrainian internationals on opposing sides coming together, giving each other a hug, and actually not to mention the fans, of course, at Goodison Park, actually getting together, holding up their banners to Ukraine. I found it incredibly moving. I don't know about you, but do you think we're going to see similar scenes at the Chelsea game?
Yeah, I think we might. I mean, you know, Liverpool fans have long had a pretty keen and acute sense of social conscience on this, and I'd be surprised if there wasn't some sort of banners or something that was held up. In fact, to be honest with you, I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't something from the Chelsea as well. There has been recognition of the fact that, you know, this has impacted far and wide on international sport. The global reach of the Premier League means that we do have, obviously, Ukrainians playing in over here. Indeed, at the moment, Wolves and West Ham are playing at the Olympic Stadium. West Ham have given time off to Andrei Yarmolenko, Ukrainian, who's not playing today. And I'm playing for Wolves is a guy called Max Kilman, who's got a granddad and uncle caught up actually in Kiev at the moment as we're speaking. So, yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is that with the increasing range of international sport and the lessening and lessening in the global reach of the sporting sphere, everything is on our doorstep, and I just think that this isn't the last we've heard from this. Just in the last half an hour, Sweden and the Czech Republic have said they're not going to play in the World Cup qualifier that will determine who goes to Qatar at the end of this year.
Exactly.
You know,
and on that point, Neil, on that point in particular about the World Cup, I mean, you've mentioned the Premier League there, but Poland was supposed to be playing Russia in the World Cup qualifier next month. What do you actually think is going to happen there? You know, where are we going to end up? Is Russia going to just end up not being able to play or qualify? Well, it certainly won't be able to qualify, will it?
Well, if they've got no one to play, Darren, it leaves FIFA, the governing body of world football, in a pretty difficult position. My own reading of the situation is I think that Russia will become a sporting outcast. They'll become a pariah if this conflict continues, and countries will just be queuing up not to play them at anything. To be perfectly honest with you, in pretty much the same sort of way that South Africa became a pariah back in the 1980s due to apartheid, and I think that that's the way this is going. The overwhelming feeling on this is that, you know, it was needless conflict, and people are making their feelings very known on this.
Yeah, I'm actually interested. I'm a fan of Newcastle United myself, but there is a sort of a creeping trend, isn't there, of these big, well, it has to be said, countries. Saudi Arabia, of course, having a big interest in Newcastle United. Do you think this trend of quote-unquote sports washing, is that becoming a real problem where you've got the Russian involvement in Chelsea Football Club, now Newcastle United? Do you think that football is going to have a real look at itself and think about just how far it can actually go as far as geopolitics getting involved in football?
Absolutely, Darren. I mean, look, you know, politics in sport has become nothing new. You know, we go back to the 1936 Olympics in Berlin, for example. You can look at the 1980 Olympics, 1984 Olympics. I've just mentioned apartheid in South Africa. So that's nothing new. Over here, what's happened during the explosion of interest and money that's basically poured into our national game, obviously, there is football as a sport, and there is pretty much every other sport. I mean, football's a global game, and if you want, I just think that there will have to be some mechanism by which the Premier League is able to say, I'm sorry, we won't let you into our exclusive members club, because that's what it is. You've used Newcastle United as an example. They had to prove that there was a separation between the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia and the state, which they successfully managed to do, and the Premier League allowed them to play in the competition and take over at Newcastle United. Obviously, there are petrodollars propping up Manchester City, as there are abroad with Qatari money propping up Paris Saint-Germain. So yes, they have become the playthings, some of these football clubs, of nation states, and it is something that needs looking at.
Yeah, interesting times. Neil Moxley there from the Sunday People, thank you very much for your expert insight there. Moving on to scrap reform. Keep. Today, we're going to put to the test the first past the post voting system. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice. Richard, first of all, can we start off by saying, given your explanation about why it is, first of all, what is first past the post, and why do you actually think it's antiquated?
Good afternoon, Darren. Well, it's very simple. First past the post is what we've got for our general elections here in the UK, and it's whoever gets the most vote in a constituency, that MP, that person is elected the MP. It means, in theory, and indeed you saw it when I had the in the 2019 general election, the winning MP there only got about 35% of people who voted, and in a sense, many more people didn't vote for the elected MP that did. So that's first past the post. The alternative, Darren, which is what we call proportional representation, or PR for short, is a much fairer system. And what it allows is that basically every vote counts. Whereas in first past the post, you can be in a safe seat of either party, either the main two parties, and your vote never counts really, because it's always a very safe seat. Whereas with proportional representation, essentially, you have constituency MPs, but you also have MPs voted on what's called a regional list, and so that ultimately the number of representatives in Parliament will work out through a very clever calculation system to be almost exactly the same as the percentage of people who voted for that party overall in the elections. And there's normally a sort of limit that you've got to have got 4 or 5% as a minimum. But above that, then everybody would get some representation, Darren. And what that means is that it makes it much fairer on smaller parties. And if you've got more small parties being represented in an elected chamber, guess what? You've got what we believe in, which is free markets. You've got competition. You've got new ideas. You've got disruptive parties coming through and challenging the status quo, Darren. And that's all for the good, as opposed to people seeing, oh, well, it's the same old, same old. And my concern is that if you just have the two-party system, if people feel their vote doesn't really count, actually interest in politics reduces and diminishes, and that's worse for everybody.
Well, yes, but if we look across to the continent of Europe, for example, where they have, scrapped or indeed never had first past the post, and they've got these PR systems, these proportional representation systems, you end up with these coalitions and trade-offs and backroom deals and all the rest of it. Are you not concerned that we could end up with that?
First of all, what's wrong with a coalition? That's the first point. But the second point is actually the opposite is proven to what you've just suggested. If you look at the Senate Assembly in Wales, you look at Holyrood in Scotland, both of which are elected with a version of proportional representation. Actually, in Wales, the Labour Party is still the governing party by some margin, and equally in Scotland, the SNP, the same applies. So it's not necessarily a guarantee towards coalitions. It's just, it depends on individual nations. But I come back to the real point, and I hear it on the doorstep all the time. People want to vote to know, Darren, that their vote counts, that all votes are equal. And that under the current system, as I say, all votes are not equal. If you are, if you're in a safe seat of either Labour or Conservative, and you're of the other position, the other party, then essentially your vote is lost forever until you leave that constituency.
Yes, I mean, I remember in 2015, I think it was 2015, when UKIP received something like 4 million votes and got 1 MP for it, which was quite shocking itself. But Richard, in a word then, are you saying scrap, are you saying reform, or are you saying keep?
I'm saying reform. Reform the PR system. I love your things.
We're very high-tech here, Richard.
Very high-tech. We need to reform it and have a fairer system. We want people to vote for what they believe in, not what they're afraid of. That's really important, Darren.
Richard Tice, leader of Reform UK, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. It's now 2:51 and time for our campus clash. Should we abolish tuition fees? Here to debate, I'm joined by Pascal Sen, Regent University London political science and graduate, former Student Union president as well, and Steve Bennett. He's a history and politics at Reading University. So why should we abolish tuition fees? Why should we realistically, with huge sums of student debt on what is frankly in many instances Mickey Mouse degrees, as I describe them, which serve very little purpose in improving society and actual job prospects, why should we bother doing that? Steve, I'll start with you.
Thank you for having me, Darren. It's great to be here. So a report from the Higher Education Policy Institute found that average debt for each student is going to be 45%. Sorry, not 45%, £45,000. And that's putting off a lot of people. That's a lot of money. And it goes up with interest rates. So obviously, a lot of people are put off going to university. And that ends up, I think, really damaging the amount of educated people we have in our country. And it, and then it affects the quality of businesses.
Well,
and,
Steve,
so on and so forth.
What I would say to that is, as someone who went to university and dropped out of it and did a frankly useless degree in the creative industries, I actually don't think that you do leave feeling more educated. I don't think it does make you more educated member of society. I just think it saddles you with massive amounts of debt. And, well, frankly, it's not worth it. Where do you stand on that point?
Well, I think that there's a lot of degrees, as you said, that are Mickey Mouse degrees. They're not really going to have any sort of value to society or help get a job. But I think also if you look at an employer and to say if you want to get a job, I think if you say I have a degree, but someone that doesn't have a degree, the person with the degree in general is more likely to get the job.
Yeah, I agree with that. I hear what you're saying there, and I think that's important. I think that's really important because we need to actually ensure that other avenues, other routes to success are available. Pascal, I just want to bring you in on that point. Would you actually argue that it's a good thing, actually, that we've got over, what is it now, 50% of people going to universities?
Well, I mean, on the question of whether we should abolish tuition fees, I think it's really important to remember the fact that a lot has changed in the last 30 years. Since in the 1990s, tuition fees were brought in at £1,000, then £3,000, and the last increase in 2012 that brought it to about 9,000 and change. And the interesting thing that we have to remember in all of that is that actually the elasticity of demand on an economical level for higher education is very low. What does that actually mean? It means that the increases of tuition fees have not resulted in a drop-off or a decrease in students actually attending university. And so the fundamental argument of those in favor of abolishing tuition fees is often linked with accessibility for one part. So the fact that it's a very unelastic market and the fact that actually numbers of attendees of universities has increased since the last 32 years.
To the two of you, can I just really quickly ask the question of, do you actually think that we need to put more of an emphasis on there being other avenues to success? Should it really be the case that you need to go to get a university degree and increasingly a master's degree to be, quote unquote, successful? Steve, I'll start with you. In a word.
Yes, there needs to be other avenues, yeah.
Pascal, do you agree with that emphasis as well?
Absolutely. We should be training people with vocational degrees that aren't necessarily university degrees, more plumbers, more carpenters, to train people with actual skills.
Well, hey, there we are. Not a clash at all. Not a clash at all. We agree with each other. Thank you very much for your time, the pair of you. You have been watching Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Thank you as ever for your company. The show is on every Saturday and Sunday at 2 p.m. But for now, I'll leave you with the weather.